When I turned 90, I started noticing something. Friends I had known for decades were forgetting names, forgetting conversations, forgetting parts of themselves. They told me it was normal. Just aging, they said. But deep down, I wasn't convinced. I'm 103 years old now. I still read every morning. I still remember birthdays. I still hold long conversations without losing my thoughts. And every single morning, I eat the same 2 fruits. I'm not saying they are magic, but after more than a century of life, I've learned that the smallest daily choices shape the mind far more than we realize. Before I share what they are, I want to tell you something. If you care about staying sharp, staying independent, and understanding how to age with clarity instead of fear, subscribe to this channel. Here we talk honestly about what really helps as the years go by, without exaggeration and without false promises. Now let me tell you how this simple morning ritual became part of my life. For most of my life, I believed loving my family meant putting myself last. I thought sacrifice was a form of strength. And maybe it was. But no one ever told me that caring for myself was also a responsibility. There is something that happens to many women as the years pass. We become the memory keepers. We remember the birthdays, the recipes, the stories, the small details that hold a family together. And when memory begins to fade, it feels like losing a part of our identity. That is why I chose not to ignore those small warning signs, not out of fear, but out of respect for the life I had built. Now let me tell you why this became important to me. When I was 89, something happened that scared me more than I expected. I walked into a room and forgot why I was there. It was a small thing. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. But in those 10 seconds, I felt something I had never felt before: uncertainty. Later that week, I forgot the name of a neighbor I had known for years. I laughed it off in the moment, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept asking myself a quiet question. Is this how it begins? I had seen it happen to friends. First, the small lapses. Then, the repeated stories. Then, the blank stares. I wasn't afraid of getting older. I was afraid of disappearing while still being alive. So instead of accepting it as inevitable, I started reading. I spoke to doctors. I studied people who stayed mentally sharp past 100, and I noticed something interesting. The ones who kept their clarity were not doing extreme things. They were consistent with very simple habits, especially in the morning. That is when I changed one small part of my breakfast. That is when I changed one small part of my breakfast. For most of my life, I was busy taking care of everyone else. My husband, my children, later my grandchildren. I made sure everyone ate well. I reminded everyone of their appointments. I worried about their health. And somewhere along the way, I stopped paying attention to mine. I wasn't sick in a dramatic way, but I was tired more often. My thoughts felt slower. Some mornings I woke up feeling heavy, not in my body, but in my mind. I told myself it was just age. That is what people do. They normalize decline. But that moment when I forgot why I walked into that room stayed with me. It was small, but it shook something inside me. I realized I had spent decades caring for others, yet I had never truly studied how to care for my own longevity. So I began reading about aging, not trends, not miracle cures, real research about inflammation, blood flow to the brain, antioxidants, how sugar affects memory, how certain nutrients protect neurons over time. I learned that the brain does not suddenly fail. It weakens slowly, quietly, often because of small daily habits repeated for years. And that is when I looked at my breakfast. It was simple: toast, jam, coffee, quick, convenient, comfortable, but not protective. I asked myself a new question. If I want my mind to stay clear at 100, What should I be feeding it at 90? That question changed everything. The first fruit I added was blueberries. I did not choose them because they were fashionable. I chose them because everywhere I looked, when scientists talked about protecting the brain, blueberries kept appearing. I learned that as we age, inflammation slowly increases in the body, and the brain is not immune to that. Blueberries are rich in anthocyanins, the natural compounds that give them their deep blue color. Researchers have found that these compounds help reduce oxidative stress and support communication between brain cells. There was one study that caught my attention. Older adults who consumed blueberries regularly showed improvements in memory and cognitive function compared to those who did not. It was not magic, it was not instant, but it was measurable. That word mattered to me. Measurable. I was not looking for a miracle. I was looking for protection over time. So I began eating a small handful every morning. Not a bowl, not excessive amounts, just enough to be consistent. I would add them to plain yogurt or eat them alongside my breakfast. Within a few months, something subtle changed. I felt more mentally present. Conversations felt lighter. Reading felt easier. It was not dramatic, it was steady. And steady is what builds longevity. I started to understand something important. The brain does not need extreme changes. It needs daily support. And that was only the first piece. The second fruit surprised even me. It was pomegranate. I remember the first time I sat at the kitchen table trying to open one. The seeds stained my fingers. It was messy. I almost gave up. But something about it felt worth the effort. I had been reading about how important blood flow is for the brain, not in a complicated way, just in a simple understanding that the mind needs nourishment the same way the heart does. And pomegranate kept coming up as a fruit that supports that gentle circulation we depend on as we age. So I made it part of my mornings. Not in a dramatic way. I did not change my entire life overnight. I simply added a small spoonful of those deep red seeds next to my blueberries. That was it. What I noticed over time was not a sudden transformation. It was something quieter. I felt clearer when I spoke. I could stay present in conversations. I did not feel that fog creeping in the way I once feared it might. Maybe it was the fruit. Maybe it was the consistency. Maybe it was the decision to finally care for myself after years of caring for everyone else. But I do know this. When you reach a certain age, you understand that small daily acts matter more than grand promises. Those two fruits became my quiet commitment to staying here fully, not just alive, present. I want to be very honest with you. This is my personal experience. It is what worked for me after many years of learning, adjusting, and paying attention to my own body. It is not a miracle formula, and it is not a replacement for proper medical care. As I grew older, I made sure something else became part of my routine as well. I kept my medical appointments. I asked questions. I checked my blood work. I listened carefully when my doctor explained changes in my body. I learned that true longevity is a partnership between daily habits and professional guidance. The fruits I eat every morning are part of that story, but they are not the whole story. Regular checkups, honest conversations with doctors, staying active, managing stress, and sleeping well all play a role. Aging well is not one decision. It is many small, wise decisions made consistently. This is simply my journey. A woman who spent most of her life caring for others and finally decided to care for herself with intention. Blueberries, pomegranate, medical checkups, curiosity, consistency, respect for my body. I am 103 years old, and my mind is still sharp.
Not because I ignored aging, but because I faced it with awareness. If you choose to make changes in your life, do it thoughtfully. Speak with your doctor. Understand your body. Then build small morning habits that support you for years to come. And if this conversation helped you see aging in a calmer, clearer way, subscribe and stay with us. We are not chasing miracles here. We are building strength quietly, one morning at a time.